Good evening. Let me call the Stillwater Planning Commission meeting of February 4th, 2020 is called to order. Let me briefly describe the format of the evening meeting. It will be a process this evening to call for the items on the agenda. The commission will hear staff's report first, then hear from the applicant, then open the public hearing and hear for those in favor or in opposition to the request. When you come to the podium, please clearly state your name and address for the record. After all interested parties have spoken, the public hearing will be closed. I will limit tonight's presentations to 5 minutes. Try not to repeat what other speakers have said. If you do want some additional time, if you would inform me, I'll be lenient to add a minute or so to that time if you need it. Then we'll hear closing remarks and alternatives from the staff. Item 2A, CHC Management LLC Preliminary Plat SUB 19-23 requesting review and approval to create a new residential subdivision named Skyline East Section 2 consisting of 132 residential lots and 2 outlots on property addressed as 1798 North Payne Street. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Ryan Harkins, Community Development. This is a proposed preliminary plat titled Skyline East. It is near Payne, Crayler, and Sunrise and Jardeau. You can see the proposed area here in the hatched pattern. We'll note that Skyline Elementary and Stillwater Junior High are to the west of the hatched area. Jardeau is here. The red line on this graphic is the city limits, and then Sunrise is to the south. Skyline is to the west. This is an additional aerial view of the proposed plat area. You can see this junior high in that graphic as well as the playground, some industrial tracks, as well as a mixture of residential and other uses. This is what the proposed preliminary plat looks like at this time. It is a proposal for 132 single-family residential lots and 2 outlots. You can see outlot B and A in the northeast and southeast corners of the property. They're proposing access from Payne, Moore, and Crayler at the present time. This item was brought before you on January 7th and then deferred while you waited the results of a traffic impact analysis. Staff has received that and reviewed it. At the present time, unless you have questions of staff, we're going to yield the floor to the applicant and their agent for further presentation.
I have no questions for the staff at this time.
Okay. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. Stephen Gose with Gose & Associates, 113 East 8th Avenue, here on behalf of the applicant CHC Management. We're here tonight requesting approval of a preliminary plat for the 27-acre, 132-lot subdivision. As Ryan mentioned, the zoning of the property is currently RSS, small lot, single family. Ryan covered what's around us to each direction. The comprehensive plan for this area is low density. Low density is defined as a gross density of less than 20 units an acre. The RSS zoning district allows a density of up to 8 units an acre. The current layout has 4.8 units per acre. It's going to be developed in 2 phases. Brook Avenue is kind of the phase line right here. So that south half developed first, the north half developed second. It's a little different than the layout from 2016, which had a series of north-south streets in it. The minimum lot size on this current layout is 50 by 110, which is 5,500 square feet. Code minimum is 5,000. Several of the lots on the west, the south, and the east are up to 125 to 135 feet deep. The goal for the development is workforce or affordable housing, $190,000 price range. So that's the general layout. Drainage study has been submitted and approved by city staff as part of the preliminary plat. There's 3 drainage areas on the site, one to the south that picks up a pretty good area south and west of the site. Another discharge on the north that picks up the north side of the junior high, Crayler, and the north side of the site. And then there's a small area that drains to the east that in our proposed grading plan is just a few of these lots. There's no street drainage off-site that doesn't go through one of the detention ponds. There is an outfall currently right in this area, served from an inlet in Skyline that drains the east part of Skyline and the south part of the junior high. The plan is to put that in a ditch with 4-to-1 side slopes, drain it around, culvert under Payne into this detention pond. That ditch is about 5 feet deep, just based on the grading. The 100-year storm event, the flows in that ditch are about 2 feet deep. Traffic study has been completed since the last meeting. That was one of the conditions of tabling it. The traffic study was done by a firm out of Oklahoma City who does studies in and around Stillwater all the time. Somebody that, talking to the city engineer they've worked with before and trust, the findings show that there are no off-site improvements that would be warranted by this development or additional points of access. Also, with regard to traffic, and it's referenced in the study, this developer is also working on the build-out of East Ridge to the northwest of the schools. That includes the extension of Grandview from Dell Avenue to Lakeview, which would relieve a lot of the traffic that's going down Dell and Benjamin right now through those neighborhood streets.
Could you show that on some sort of map so I can follow that? What connection?
So right here, Crayler right now goes to Grandview at the northwest corner of the school tract. From Dell to Lakeview, that road is not in.
Okay.
Right now, all that traffic has to travel west on Dell, just off-site, 2 roads to Benjamin to get out. So part of what they're doing, they're building out the lots on Swim, and they'll build the lots out on Grandview. As part of that, they have to construct a Grandview. So that will get some of that traffic through East Ridge 2 going straight north to Lakeview. I know construction traffic has been a concern. The primary entrance for construction will be up here in the northwest corner off of Crayler. The city transportation department has a good program right now where prior to big construction projects like this, they'll go through, assess the conditions of the street, work with the developer and their contractors to address construction routes, and assess damages after construction if roads were damaged from the construction, to have them go back and fix those. We've also, since the last meeting, been working on the water and sewer modeling that will be submitted with the improvement plans. There's a 12-inch water line in Skyline, one in Sunrise, and a series of 6 and 8 inches. We'll connect at all 3 of the street connections. The modeling shows that the flow and pressures will be more than sufficient than the city standards. I know right now there's the fire flow test that we saw from the city. There's a fire hydrant down here at Sunrise and Payne, had pretty low residual pressures. The ones on Skyline, the difference in the static and the residual didn't really move. But so by connecting this, it should help some of those issues down on Sunrise. The sewer, there's 2 sewer systems ultimately on this. The south half of the site drains to an existing sewer line on the north side of Sunrise that drains southeast. That one's existing. The north piece will be served by an off-site line that will be constructed over to West Brush Creek. We've attended 2 neighborhood meetings on this, one prior to the last meeting in December, prior to the map amendment, and when we submitted the preliminary plat initially to rezone this east piece from RT to RSS, We had a neighborhood meeting at the school where 4 neighbors showed up. We discussed the project with them. Since the last meeting, on Sunday, January 19th, a handful of the neighbors hosted a meeting at one of their houses. We went to that and sat down with them and explained to them what we were proposing, why we were doing it, and they voiced their concerns and their wants or wishes for 2 points of access to Jardot and a lower density. As previously mentioned, the TIA and the City Transportation Department does not want a road to Jardot if it's not warranted, because that has to be maintained in perpetuity. It also creates an additional intersection on Jardot. That intersections are primarily where traffic conflicts happen and accidents, so anything we can do to minimize that. And then the density, again, we're at 40% less than what's allowed by code, 4.8 units to acre versus 8. And to keep this within that affordable range for the workforce housing, that's really the density we're needing to go for. I can answer questions now, or I can wait till after the balance of the public hearing.
Any questions?
Yes, could you rewind your discussion about the traffic study? Could you read the conclusion again, please?
You want the 1.5 page version or the
No,
short version?
the succinct version.
The succinct version is the recommendations and improvements. There's 2 bullets. Intersection and roadway improvements are not shown to be needed based on the analysis documented in this report, and none are recommended at this time. The second bullet, Stillwater Junior High and Skyline Elementary Schools should consider drop-off and pickup procedures that maximize vehicle storage on site to limit spillback onto adjacent roadways.
So were there numbers presented in this analysis that would lead us to understand how that conclusion was made?
There's a 133-page traffic
Okay,
report.
will that be?
Were traffic counts given, or were they received on Kyler or Skyline? Is my major question, which is following up from your question,
Exactly.
is what the 4 major roads, there are traffic counts and there's projections. But on the residential streets, especially next to the school, I could not find any.
They did
Traffic
counts
counts.
at Lakeview and Perkins, Benjamin and Lakeview, Sunrise and Jardot, Skyline and McElroy, and Jardot and McElroy.
So they did no interior residential traffic counts that would show the impact of this in the school areas, is what I got a copy earlier and went through it and could not find anything that showed any
They didn't
impact.
count at Skyline and Sunrise. They used their distribution models to, I guess, extrapolate those numbers.
So the impact in the school districts, when they went through their model, are they assuming or not assuming peak on peak during the school drop-off time frame?
They would be doing that because at least for Skyline, because that drop off is during the peak hour.
So we're talking about 130 homes with somewhere in the neighborhood of, as I read the traffic study, 60% of the people coming down Kyler Avenue and having an impact during the peak school drop-off time, and you're requesting the school to spend money for them to be off the road? Is that
Well,
what
what
I'm
they're
hearing?
stating is that currently, I mean, the traffic situation out there's queuing on the public streets.
Yes.
And the school district, I mean, I know at Skyline and at the junior high, they're trying to do things to get those queues off the street. But yeah, I mean, those are 15 or 20 minutes in the morning, there's going to be peak on peak. And based on their analysis, it operates and will continue to operate at a level of service C which on local streets in their language, and they're the professionals.
So, are you telling me that they say that Kyler is operating at level C during this peak time frame?
They say they're level C or better. Nothing's worse than a level C.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, I interrupted you, but I had those questions.
No, that was totally fine.
Does anybody have any more questions?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me open up the public hearing. Is there anybody here that wants to speak in favor of this item? Does anyone here want to speak in favor of this item? We did have a sign-up sheet, and I am assuming those people that signed up are not in favor of this item. So we took up the sign-up sheet early, so I'll go through the names. You may speak, and then I'll open it up to anybody else that'd like to speak. And I'm a terrible person with the English language, so I'm terrible in names. The first is Simon Ring something.
Close enough. We've got a couple of handouts for the commissioners. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. At this time, I would like to request a little extra time. I have prepared remarks. I promise I will not waste your or anyone else's time.
You're approved for an additional minute, and
Okay.
then once you reach that, if you need to spend some extra time, tell me, and then I'll probably approve it.
Thank you very much. I sure do appreciate it. And oh yes, my name is Simon Ringsmooth. My address is 1705 East Linda Avenue in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Members of the Planning Commission, is my PowerPoint up? Okay. Before I get started, I want to publicly thank Steve Ghost for meeting with several of us in the neighborhood on January 19th. I appreciate his willingness to visit with us in person and talk about some of these issues in a productive manner. Thank you very much, Mr. Ghost. Here you're going to see a map of the plat that's under consideration tonight. This map shows the roads that go throughout the development, as well as Jardeau, Sunrise, and Skyline. I'd like to highlight specifically the housing density of Skyline East. And to illustrate, I want to point out these housing groups in the middle. You can see them in red. Let's zoom in for a closer look. Each of these lots is 50 feet by 110 feet, as has been stated. You can see one of these lots highlighted here. If we look at 8 of these lots together, it creates a parcel of land 44,000 square feet in size. And I want to show some numbers here. One lot in Skyline East is 5,500 square feet. 8 lots is 44,000 square feet. For reference, 1 acre is 43,560 square feet. That means on 1 single acre of actual housing in Skyline East, there will be nearly 8 houses, 7.92 to be exact. This density is a massive contrast to every neighborhood on the east, south, and west, and it's the source of one of the biggest problems with the plat. The blue area that you can see here is an acre, and you can see that 8 houses almost fit on a single acre. That tiny little red strip is the difference between 1 acre and 8 houses. You can see this on your handout as well. What I'm getting at here is that the raw numbers of this development don't match the reality of this development. At the Planning Commission meeting on January 7th, it was stated that there would be about 5 units per acre. If you do the math, you divide 132 houses by 27 acres. That's true. But as you can see here, in reality, nearly 8 houses are going to occupy a single acre because you can't build a house on a street or in a retention pond. Skyline East is going to be among the most densely populated residential neighborhoods in the whole city. And just 200 feet south are some of the largest lots in town with 1 lot per acre. There isn't another neighborhood in Stillwater with such a stark contrast in housing density. We certainly have areas of high density housing and areas of low density housing. Eastridge, Anderson Hill, Crestwood, the Canyons, and so on. They're all similar density as Skyline East. But if you pull up the county assessor's website, you'll see the same thing I did. The contrast we're seeing here between planned development and existing development is entirely unprecedented. There's nothing else like it in the city. It's also worth noting that none of the housing developments, none of them with similar density in Stillwater, have their only access points leading directly into school zones. I've never seen anything like this before. In 2011, the Planning Commission and the City Council voted on the Aspen Heights development that was planned for Jardo and McElroy, and many of the same concerns were brought up then: traffic, safety, and housing density. Councilor John Bartley summed up his no vote by saying, "This is the right project, but the wrong location." Members of the Planning Commission, the same holds true here. Nobody's saying that Stillwater shouldn't have workforce housing. We need it for teachers, police, and firefighters. But just like Aspen Heights, let's do it in a way and at a location that can actually work. Let me show you what Skyline East would look like under the plat you're voting on today. This is our neighborhood as it currently exists. And the green patch at the top is a field where Skyline East is being planned. Watch closely and you'll see Skyline East appear. And notice how dense the housing is in Skyline East compared to the surrounding areas. Here's Skyline East after it's fully developed. You can see this on the second page of your handouts. Again, I want to take a closer look. One of these neighborhoods here is not at all like the other. And I want to point out that during the first weekend in January, myself and a few others collected over 110 signatures from residents in the neighborhood who are opposed to this development as currently platted. That's over 110 people who don't want this, again, as currently platted. Now I'd like to turn your attention to another area of town for reference, Berry Creek. In many ways, it's similar to Skyline East. It's a newer development right near an elementary school and middle school, and it's near two main arteries, 19th and Sanger. The big difference, aside from housing density and lot size, is that it has not one, but two access points directly onto 19th. You can see these two access points here, indicated by green circles. Now, what if we took out these two access points and we put all that traffic, we forced it to go east? It would cause traffic problems for everyone in the neighborhood and everyone in Berry Creek. Fortunately, that's not how Berry Creek was developed. But this is exactly how Skyline East is currently platted. 132 houses with no direct access to the main artery on that side of town. In addition, there are no places for kids to run and play, no trails, no parks, just as many houses as humanly possible, with no plan for getting the residents to where they need to go. I'd like to request additional time. I'm nearly finished. Instead, we're going to shunt all the cars right into two school zones that can barely handle existing cars. On January 23rd, I saw a presentation by Quint Studer, who repeatedly emphasized the incredible opportunities we have here in Stillwater to create a vibrant, attractive, growing community. He said our city could be a 10, but right now it's about a 5. Ladies and gentlemen, we already have a 10 neighborhood in the northeast part of town, but Skyline East is currently platted would dramatically bring it down. It's significantly higher density housing than any of the surrounding neighborhoods. It puts traffic into school zones, has bare minimum in terms of sidewalks, yard space, and overall livability. Developing it as platted would be contrary to everything Mr. Quint Studer talked about and an irresponsible way to address the housing needs of our city. But I want to offer a solution. Put people over sheer profits. By all means, let's develop Skyline East. We all know it's going to happen, but let's do it responsibly. And here are 3 options to consider. Lower the density of the housing, make the homes and lots bigger and more attractive to home buyers, and create direct access to Jardo. This land has been for sale for almost 2 years. The property provides an opportunity to create access to the main artery and would make the area safer for neighborhood kids and easier access to residents. Yes, I know adding a street would add an intersection, but Skyline and Sunrise is incredibly unsafe now with all the traffic and the elementary school kids, and it would be a lot worse with Skyline East. So an intersection, yes, it might be a good thing to add on Jardo. Some of us inquired about this, and the response we got from the developer was that they just didn't want to pay for it. And it really all came down to money. They were putting short-term profits over long-term safety and neighborhood life, quality of life. I hope that the developer would reconsider that. Meanwhile, close off the access points at Sunrise and the one at Moore, and turn the one at Moore into foot traffic so that all the kids who live in that development can walk to school without being run over by cars coming down Skyline Street. Commissioners, thank you for your time. I urge you to vote against this plat. Let's not settle here. Let's set our sights high, like Quint Studer said. Let's dream big, put long-term gain over short-term profits, and make Skyline East a place that everyone can be proud of, and future residents will be happy to call their home. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you for your comment. If you please do not applause. We'll keep our business going. Carla Gold.
See the directory where my photos are.
Could you reset the timer?
If you could give your name and address, I appreciate it.
I do. Good evening. I am Carla Goad, and I live at 1210 North Payne. My husband and I have lived there since 2004. All three of my children attended Skyline Elementary and Stillwater Junior High School. The traffic issues around these schools and in our neighborhoods are not new to us, but they've gotten a lot worse over time. I have written you a more lengthy letter that I hope you've received. These remarks are in addition to that letter. First, this is a satellite view of the area in question, which you've seen. Traffic for Skyline Elementary, down here at the bottom here, becomes congested on sunrise, both from the east and the west. Each administration of Skyline has tried to cope with the traffic issues regarding morning drop-off and afternoon pickup. Students from across Stillwater attend Stillwater Junior High School, and the traffic comes to Stillwater Junior High School from more than just this neighborhood. Traffic comes across Lakeview from the north, and as Mr. Goes said, it comes down Benjamin, Dell, Kraler, and on to Stillwater Junior High. There are plans then for this extension to be built in for Grandview, going from Kraler up to Lakeview. I would imagine that the residents of Benjamin and Dell would be thrilled about this. It will not ease the traffic around the schools, however. It's the same number of cars, if not more, still coming into those school areas. For the junior high, from the south, the traffic load here is on Skyline, up from McElroy, some coming in from both the east and the west on Sunrise. The primary drop-off point that was addressed a little bit by Mr. Goes is on the east side of the junior high school. There is a circle drive there with one dedicated entrance at the north end and an exit on the south end. The circle drive is one way with 2 lanes. Traffic backs up on Kraler and Skyline in order to access this circle drive. The parking lot on the south side of the school is primarily for school bus drop-off. After school, many of those picking up students park over at Skyline Elementary or along Sunrise or any of the other neighborhood streets for their students then to walk from the school down to meet their cars, even somewhat so far as this Payne Street spur over here to avoid the traffic that's on Skyline Street. Recently, there have been some complaints then with the problems with East Sunrise to the east of North Skyline. There are no curbs on this, and some of the parents or those picking students up are parking in residents' yards and doing damage to their yards. The interim Stillwater Junior High School principal has contacted parents and requested them to refrain from that behavior. This photo is typical of the traffic that accumulates after school. This was done on January 28th, last week. Sorry for the rain. You can see the students then that are leaving the school and accessing there was a line of traffic off to the left of this picture of cars lined up in both directions on Sunrise. And then you just get in line and you wait to get into the school. There are no traffic controls other than the 4-way stop at which I'm sitting at when I'm taking this. From Skyline Park, looking north onto Skyline. This is the traffic. The proposed Moore Avenue entrance into Skyline East would be back in here, which is completely inaccessible during school drop-off. In his presentation in early January, Mr. Goes was estimating 2-point-something cars per household. So that would put more than 200 to 300 cars or vehicles in this proposed development, contributing to this traffic load. These schools exist in a neighborhood, and multiple lanes of traffic, such as those on Sanger Road in front of Stillwater Middle School, are not an option. Quoting an unnamed city official, "This is not just a neighborhood, but a special area of schools embedded in a neighborhood, and a neighborhood that has an inadequate street access as it is." Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Moore?
I'm going to hand out here before to get us started. You didn't give an option for or against, but I'm giving information from a school perspective. So, and then I was here at the last meeting. Before I get, I guess, Mr. Booker, I better state my name. Mark Moore, 318A South Knob Block. So I gave this information last time, and I wanted to be here available if you had concerns or questions from a school perspective. One, if you would look on the back of the page, the one without the overview of the Stillwater Junior High and Skyline site, this is our most recent planning for Stillwater Junior High. So what we're currently in phase 1 of extending out on the east side of the building. When we complete out with phase 2, we will have the front loop will actually enter from Kraler. So it will queue, right now it enters off of Skyline. So it's going to give us a little bit more queuing on that side for automobile traffic. When we do finish out with the planning for the junior high, it will have a bus loop around the back, and then that will exit out. So we'll most likely have buses that exit out onto Kraler and onto Skyline that will circle into the parking lot there, located on the south side. As we continue to look at this, this is really a repeat of what I gave you previously. Probably as we're looking at this and evaluating it from our students going to and from school, probably the biggest area of concern, and we would like for you to consider, is the interchange there at Skyline and Sunrise. Currently, if you look at Skyline, right now we do not, if a house is located within 1.5 miles of the school district, we do not provide transportation. So it means kids within that area are going to be walking. Skyline's one of our probably first in the ranks of kids who walk to and from the school. The other thing is we do have in the mornings and the afternoon that queue all the way to the Sunrise and Skyline interchange. So as we look at how this would impact and how we'd looked at our safety of going to that spot, one, when we evaluate whether drop-offs for walkways and crossing or trying to decide whether we put someone as a crosswalk, a lot of times we look at the value of how much traffic is there, and then also maybe the speeds. One thing that we evaluated with this situation at the Skyline and Sunrise is, one, since we do have queuing to that point, it's going to create right now it currently has irregular traffic flow. So when we have if you have a more regular traffic flow where people come to the lights, they make the decision to move forward, now it's a little bit more irregular. So when you have irregular, you have cars standing still, you have blind spots where kids are to and from. So as we look at this as evaluation from a safety standpoint, and then we add a new variable of cars coming in from the south side, that's going to create another variable into that interchange. So as you're looking at the safety and security, I wish you would consider the Sunrise and Skyline interchange, especially in the morning if kids come in to and from. I know there's ways, and I'm not an expert on how to do that, but whether it's traffic light or exchange or whatever we need to do to help kids get across. But that would be probably our biggest just thought of how are kids getting to and from in that interchange, and primarily because of the queuing and the irregular. activity of the cars. So, thank you. Any questions? I'll be available for questions later.
Thank you very much. Matthew Wyckoff.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Matthew Wyckoff. I live at 1824 East Sunrise, which is the corner of Payne and Sunrise. And I just want a quick note. The teacher handed, and you grab one, pass it down. Everybody else handed one to each one of you. Just thought it was a nice little thing that the teacher did that. Pass one back.
Seems very efficient to me.
It worked. I just noticed that everybody else handed you one individually. But we all have concerns. Most people have already covered the traffic, and they've already covered that type of thing. So I'm going to cover other things. It's not that I don't feel that those are as important, but I'm going to go back and say that when the Sunrise was updated after the track was put in, this was what, back in 2010, 2011, I think. They unloaded and loaded the heavy equipment on existing roads. That happened there on the stub north of Sunrise on Payne. Damage to that stub has not been fixed to this day. So I'm concerned that they're going to bring this heavy equipment either through the north off of Lakeview and through that housing addition there up to Crayler to the northeast corner or northwest corner of their property, or they're going to come right on that Sunrise and then right up Crayler to that same corner, because that's where they say they're going to bring in the heavy equipment and do start the construction dirt work. So if we look at the history here, we've got damage to the roads that hasn't been repaired from the time that the last repair road work was done in the neighborhood. And we're looking at bringing in heavy equipment to do the same type of thing, and we're going to put the roads that have not been repaired, such as Crayler and Skyline, at risk of the same damage. So I think that one of the things that needs to be considered, and this may be something that should be blanket across the entire town, is that all equipment should be loaded and unloaded within the development area so that the tracks of the bulldozers don't come down on the cement or asphalt of the roads that are already there doing damage to the roads. So I think that's one major point. Another one is that's a 5-foot ditch they're talking about? A 5-foot ditch. How many people, like my 101-year-old neighbor to my east, are going to, and then of course he wouldn't be responsible because it's north of the property, but the people that move in there, how many of those are going to be actually physically capable of maintaining a grade of that stat while mowing their lawns? How well is that drainage ditch going to be upkept? Sure, it might look great when they're done, first couple of years, within the first 5 years, but after that, it's going to start degrading. So this is still something that needs to be considered because it's something that you're going to have the homeowners maintain. I believe that that's pretty much citywide at this point as well, is that all easements and areas need to be maintained by the homeowners or the landowners, not the city anymore. Is that correct? So it is something that we need to look at. And then my final bit is when they were doing Skyline, they actually blocked access. I couldn't get out and get to work some mornings. Okay, what would happen if someone needed an ambulance? Again, that's why I feel that all that equipment should be loaded and offloaded within the construction area. Thank you.
Thank you. Leslie Meyer.
Hi, my name is Leslie Meyer, and I live at 1102 North Payne Street. Since the fall of 2011 and the proposal of Aspen Heights, this is the third time that citizens in the Northeast Stillwater have had to come together, mount a defense, and plead our case before the Planning Commission and the City Council in an attempt to protect our investments and to maintain the safety and integrity of our neighborhoods. Literally hundreds of man-hours and hundreds of dollars have been spent by ordinary citizens in our area to defend what we hold dear. And I'm beginning to feel a real kinship with the people that live in the Westwood neighborhood. This whole process seems convoluted to me. Why are we having to defend our neighborhoods from developments that are ill-advised and will certainly bring negative consequences to the existing schools and residents in the area? Shouldn't the burden of proof be on the developer to convince the homeowners and the planning commissioners that their proposal fits into the landscape that exists and will be a benefit to the surrounding area? If the developer were truly concerned about overall impact of the development, how could they convince us that the stark increase in density is a good fit for our area? How could they convince us that it is reasonable to add 132 homes with no exit to Jardo? How could they convince us that the increased traffic exiting directly into a school zone from 3 different points is not going to be a safety concern for children and their parents? After learning about this proposal about 7 weeks ago, we still do not know the identity of the developer. There is anonymity behind the name of an LLC and by having Mr. Ghost represent them in public forums. We understand that only one of the partners is from Stillwater, the other 2 from out of town. While the developers remain anonymous, we, the citizens, are required to submit letters for the public record and to stand before a TV camera to make our case. I think it's reasonable to assume that none of the developers will be residents of Skyline East. Their primary focus seems to be profit rather than considering the impact the development will have on the schools and the existing residents. Mr. Ghost was gracious enough to attend a meeting with some homeowners on January 19th. He was attentive to our concerns and willing to convey those concerns and the possible solutions that we offered to the developers, and we really do appreciate that. As citizens, we are depending on you, the Planning Commission, and the City Council to be the voice of reason in this process. Just because a plan meets the minimum requirements and the letter of the law does not mean that it must be approved. The context and consequences of the bigger picture must be considered. In this case, we have long-established neighborhoods surrounding 2 schools that are intertwined in those neighborhoods, unlike other schools in the Stillwater area. This unique situation must come to bear on what is approved here. All we can do is voice our concerns and trust you to act in the best interest of all citizens. And again, I thank you for your service and for hearing my concerns.
Thank you. Valerie Kissling?
Hello, my name is Valerie Kissling. I live at 1903 North Skyline, which is directly across from the front door of the junior high. My husband and I bought our house in 1995, so we've been there for 25 years, and we have learned how to work around the times when the traffic would be there, and we have really enjoyed raising our children there and living in proximity, this close proximity to the schools. The traffic study that was presented tonight holds no water for me. I cannot, because exiting both those ways, especially down Benjamin during high traffic time, in that neighborhood over there, parking is still allowed on the street, on both sides of the street. And often there's large backup when a bus needs to wait to get through on the parking. When we first moved there was parking allowed on Skyline. And I remember I went to the parking commission for that. I don't think I got it changed, but eventually signs were put up there prohibiting parking during certain times of the day. My other concern is that, like I said, we've lived there 25 years. We've invested our money, our retirement. It is in our house. And I feel that it will bring the property value down of our houses along there. We don't have as big lots as they do over in the other area. which are gorgeous. But I feel a lot of resentment for that after something that we've poured so many years and so many dollars in will be devalued by this. So I urge you not to approve this plat. I would urge them to have a much lower density on this. We have loved that field out back for 20 years. We've watched the deer go back and forth, watched the hawks hunt, but we've always known that something will be built back there. Just please make it good. Thank you.
It's everybody on the sign-up list. Does anybody else want to speak for, against, or neutral? Yes, sir. One person.
My name is Tom Bradley. I live at 1107 North Payne Street, and my concern is the safety of the kids. Currently, going from the intersection of Sunrise and Skyline, there's only a sidewalk on the west side, and it's in bad need of repair. It's tilted at a lot of places. It's not level and flat, so kids walk in there if it's an icy day, can slip and fall down into the street. There's no sidewalk on the east side. There are no sidewalks along Payne at all, so anybody walking or running or jogging down Payne Street are in the street. The other thing is, just the other day in Moore, 6 kids on a cross-country team were hit, 1 killed. Our cross-country track stars from the junior high run through the neighborhood. This cannot endanger the kids because they're our utmost safety. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. I will close the public hearing. Does the applicant want to say anything?
We good? Well, the anonymous developer is right here. This is Jimbo Carnley. He's the local resident. Him and his brother and one more partner are the developers and owners of this. So we'll make that introduction. Just to address a few things, back on the gross density, I know Mr. Ringsmith's exhibit had 8 units in an acre. Well, the code is gross density, so that's where we're at the 4.8. We can mix and match subdivisions all over town and get those densities. With regard to it being an out-of-place density, Eastridge 1 and Eastridge 2 to the west of Skyline, those are 4.7 houses per acre and 4.5 units per acre. There's some 4.4s, so again, we're at 4.8. So we're not double those. We're in that same general ballpark. The building to the road to Jardeau, yes, cost is an issue, but it's not profits. It's the efficiency of the lot development to try to keep them within the affordable housing market that the builder has seen and wants to address. The money is being spent on putting a quality product on the ground, not money in the pocket. A few things, Skyline and Sunrise putting a 4-way stop in there, or keeping a 4-way stop versus lights. There's studies that go both ways. In a normal situation, a 4-way stop has been shown, like in downtown high pedestrian areas, to be safer than lights, because if drivers are functioning like they should be, they will stop, look around, and then go. If we put a stoplight in, there's some of that student maybe trying to run across. So that there's both sides of that. I think that's it. If there's any questions you all have based on that, based on anything.
Any questions of the applicant?
Mr. Gose, I do have a question for you, please. Refresh my memory from the first time you were up tonight. You indicated you met with the neighborhood on 2 separate occasions, one in which 4 residents showed up and another which there was a larger group. Is that?
Yeah, we hosted a neighborhood meeting at Skyline in December prior to the first, and we sent out notices to the 300-foot radius, just like the notices for the public hearings.
And then and the second time you met, four neighbors showed up, or
Well, the
residents.
second time,
Is that what?
Simon, you had, what, 6 or 8 homeowners?
Yeah, about that.
It was around the dining room table at the
Got you. Okay.
Myers house.
Okay.
All right. Anything else? Thank you.
Staff, you want to come up and give your alternatives?
So at the present time, you can, one, accept findings in the staff report and as presented at the public hearing. You can recommend approval as presented. You can find that this this proposed plat is not appropriate, and you can recommend denial. If you feel there's additional discussion or information needed, you can table the item to a certain date. So if you needed to defer for 2 weeks or 30 days, that's another option that you have. With that in mind, staff can stand here and tell you that the proposed preliminary plat does meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance as well as subdivision regulations. This has over 2 points of access as required by the subdivision regulations for plats over 30 lots. The comprehensive plan recommends low-density residential uses in this area. Current land uses are residential and agriculture. The proposed density and lot size is within the requirements of the RSS zoning district. With that, staff would answer any questions you might have.
When was the traffic report received by staff?
It was officially received today. Engineering reviewed it today and gave us their findings. Their opinion is that the traffic study is sufficient. They had no issues with the traffic study. The city engineer feels that this proposed development does not need access to Jardo and is opposed to it, and feels the access points currently as proposed are adequate.
So it was felt that the traffic study being a model or based on a model is sufficient?
That was their opinion.
Did the traffic study look at any of the residential intersections and the capability to get pedestrians through those intersections?
To my understanding, having read through it, it did not take that into account. It was vehicular traffic.
In the intersection that Dr. Moore pointed out, does that have four-way stop there or just two-way stop? And I forgot what intersection it is. It's a four-way stop there.
I believe it's four-way.
Any other questions of the staff? Thank you very much. Can you put those three alternatives back up there?
Yes. Absolutely.
Does any commissioner want to make a comment? Is it okay if I make a comment? I have a challenge in my mind that the traffic study was delivered to staff today, and that I have great respect for the staff of the city of Stillwater and worked with many of them in great respect for the city engineer, and he has lots and lots of experience in this area. But when I read through it, I just have some concerns, and to have just a few hours for the staff and the planning commission to review it, I'm just uncomfortable making a decision tonight with what I've been presented and the time has been to present it. And that is where I'm coming from. I understand the comments that you've already been here 3 times. This will mean that if we defer it, you'll have to come a 4th time. And I understand that, and I'm sensitive to that. By the same token, hopefully you understand my concern in my mind that I'd sure like to have some more time to think about this. Commissioners?
Thank you, Chairman. I do have some things I would like to say. So this is kind of where we're at from my perspective. So where we are now is the neighbors in the neighborhood agree that at some point this plot and land will be developed. The developer has met all standards legally and is up to code and is zoned appropriately. Transportation study recommends that the access point at Jardo is not needed, not recommended, and the city engineer agrees that there should not be an access point on Jardo. The developer and the neighbors have met on 2 separate occasions. The first meeting there was a large group, the second meeting a smaller group. Everyone on board can agree that traffic is not only a safety concern, but it is a congestive conflict and concern too. Furthermore, Skyline and Stillwater Junior High are due for future plans, whether it be new school or renovations, so we'll probably find ourselves back here addressing that at some point. Additionally, the developer and the neighbors are both anxious to come to a resolution at this point, and if we defer this and come back a 4th time, there's probably going to be some frustration. But from my point of view, I would much rather get it right than just reach a decision just for reaching a decision's sake.
Yes, I agree with that. We need to reach the right decision rather than rushing to an immediate judgment. I agree with the chairman that there was not adequate time to read and analyze the traffic impact study. Certainly I didn't have a chance to even look at it. I'm not a professional, but I would think that pedestrians should be included in the whole analysis of this situation. Maybe that's not a traditional or typical view in a traffic impact study, but I think we all know that cities now are trying to encourage cycling and pedestrian movement, so that should be part of these traffic models. I lived southwest of this neighborhood for 4 years, rode my bike through the area, very familiar with the area, had kids that went to the junior high and familiar with the traffic that goes through there. And I think that's a totally legitimate concern that the citizens in the neighborhood have, that there is a definite safety issue, or it could be. I also found it interesting that it was mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that if there was an intersection put in at Jardo at some point into the planned development, that there could be accidents. Well, what do you think is going to happen when you have all this traffic around the school without adequate egress and ingress? So I think there needs to be a lot more, there needs to be a deep dive into this traffic issue. I know that perhaps we can't or vote against the development on the basis of the density, but I found it rather disingenuous by the developer saying that it was less than the maximum density that is allowed, but looking at the actual area that will be used for the housing units, that really changes the picture. So it's a much more dense development than was originally presented, even though it does meet code. That being said, I think I agree with the other two commissioners. It's an inconvenience to table this and to have to come back for reconsideration. But I think that a development of this size and potential impact needs that additional consideration.
Staff, can you come up here? And we may need direction from legal, but my understanding of the rules is that it's 60 days from the date it was first on that we must do something to this, or it's approved without our action, as I understand the rules of the city of Stillwater.
Correct.
So it was on January 7th. So can we defer it to the first meeting in March? Will that go beyond the 60 days, or need to defer it to February 18th?
That would give you March 3rd. So you would be, if the developer agrees to continue, the 60 days is not an issue in any way, shape, or form. And you have a precedent of that already from other preliminary plats in the last year that you've reviewed. So in that regard, if the developer agrees to the continuance, you would be safe no matter what. If they don't, and you still defer, based on the date of the initial public hearing, or once it's submitted, you would have to take action. You have reviewed it. You've deferred it to ask for additional information to a
So it
date
appeared
certain.
on the Planning Commission on January 7th. So that starts the clocks that date or some other date?
If you went to the March 3rd meeting, you should be legally safe.
Okay.
If the applicant agrees with the deferral, regardless, you're okay. Now, if that's something you want to ask them, we can, but if you wish to defer, that's an option that you have. Legal opinions may further illuminate
Are you in
things,
agreement
but-
with that?
My name is Beth Ann Childs. I am representing the city of Stillwater in this matter, 1015 South Detroit, Tulsa, Oklahoma. But yes, I agree. If the developer agrees to continue it, then the 60 days is inapplicable. The one bit of advice that I would have for this commission is if you do table it, I would make certain that the motion contains dates certain. So.
Which would either be the February 18th meeting or March 3rd. It would need to be one of those.
To meet the 60-day requirement.
Correct.
February 18th, we already have another possible controversial item on the agenda. So that's why I'm thinking the March 3rd date would be better.
Okay.
Does the developer have any comments towards the March 3rd versus February 18th date?
We prefer February 18th, and understanding exactly what you want us to look at. Because we escalated the TIA to the preliminary plat from the final plat, which is what's required by code. And we've had that discussion, but
That's fair.
if it's, we want the February 18th date, and are we looking at pedestrians? What are we to do in this next 2 weeks?
the developers asked for the February 18th date, even though we have another item that may take us a while. I would like to be in support of that particular date. And we just might as well
I think that's incredible.
plan on
Yeah, that's
being here a while.
Need that.
So here are the three areas that I have a concern with. Number one, I'd like to hear from the developer and from the city engineer on why they don't want to tie to Jardo Road. When I look at this and look across the city and look at where it would tie and look at the distance between the roads, it is comparable with other developments across the city. So is there something particular about this, or does the city have rules now that they want that distance to be greater now than what they've approved in the past? So that is one concern that I have. Another is the pedestrians, especially children, and sidewalks and crossings. I've heard comments about sidewalks not being in good condition. I've heard comments about sidewalks not being there. It would seem like sidewalks are one of the most inexpensive items to address if that's a problem associated with this. The other is the conflict in the neighborhood with all the traffic that's occurring there, and the school system has a master plan which they're going to take additional traffic off and queue them up off the street. I'd like to know from the city engineer's perspective, coordinating with the school system, how many additional vehicles that is, and whether it will actually address the congestion in the area. And we talk about a street connecting to another street, and that might occur someday, and that would reduce congestion. Is that any possibility of occurring? What kind of time frame is that? I said three, but I made a fourth as I was going through it. Mr. Goes, I hope you accept my apology for coming with four instead of three.
Your fourth, to be clear, would be, will Grandview help relieve congestion at all?
Yes. Commissioners have anything else that they'd like to see addressed?
I would just like to make a comment, if I may.
Yes.
I would highly encourage and recommend that if the commission makes a motion and approves a deferral to the February 18th meeting, I would encourage and suggest that Mr. Gose and the developer, or one or the other, a representative from the school, whether it be Mr. Moore or a representative of the school board, a spokesman for the neighborhood, whether it be Mr. Ringsmooth or another individual, and city staff, all come together so that all the voices are heard and can hammer this all out at the same time. I'm not sure if that's already been done, but I would highly encourage and recommend that, if that's in fact what the commission will ultimately decide to do.
Any other comments from the commissioners? Do I hear a motion?
I move we table this to the February 18th meeting of the Planning Commission, incorporating the chairman's 4 concerns, or 3, however they want to be bundled together, and have those addressed by the February 18th meeting.
Second.
Let's vote. The motion passes 3-0. It's been deferred to date certain, February 18th. let's take a 2-minute break so people have an opportunity to leave before we go to the next item. Thank you. Let me call the Planning Commission back to order. Item 2B, Fritz Property, LLC Map Amendment MA 20-01, requesting review approval to rezone property addressed at 1724 North Jardo Road from agricultural to residential single-family lot and commercial general district. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Ryan Harkins, Community Development. As mentioned, this is a map amendment to rezone property at 1724 North Jardo. You can see on the graphic to the left, the hatched pattern indicates the subject property. The graphic on the right is the existing zoning pattern in this area with the subject property again in the black hatch pattern. So the red line here would represent this corporate boundary. There's light industrial to the north. There's RSS to the south and to the west. This RT area has actually been rezoned, is in the process of being finished through the rezoning process of going to RSS, and is an item the commission has previously approved. And then there is other zoning districts, as you can see, surrounding the area farther away. This aerial indicates the subject property in the red. The comprehensive plan future land use map shows commercial for this area as well as industrial to the north, and then low density residential to the west and south. The site plan for the subject property indicates a 140-foot tract of RSS and a 507-foot wide tract of general commercial. The subject property is around 303.5 feet, give or take a few inches, from the intersection of Sunrise and Jardot. Having said that, staff is going to yield the floor to the applicant and their agent to further explain their proposal to you.
Good evening again, Stephen Ghost, Ghost and Associates. We didn't have to go far for this one. As Ryan said, it's a map amendment to go from ag to RSS and general commercial. The property owner owns this 5 acres. He's got the north 4 acres listed for sale. There's a house on the south, what we broke out at 140 feet. So that 1 acre, he cannot do a minor subdivision and sell the parcel without the appropriate zoning. And so he, with it being zoned ag, because ag, it's a 5 acre per house minimum. So we're asking for a map amendment to go RSS on the south, which is consistent with the areas to the west and the south. General commercial on the north piece of it, which is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And that's what we're asking for. So if there's any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Any questions, applicant? Hearing no questions, I'll open the
Thank you.
public hearing. Anybody here would like to speak in favor of this particular item? Anybody here would like to speak in favor of this particular item? Seeing no one, would anybody like to here speak against this item or neutral? You notice I added that to it. So is anybody here to speak against this item or neutral? Not seeing one? I'd see somebody raise their hand now.
Kathy Houston, 1107 North Skyline Street. I would just like to know more about this. I wasn't aware of it, and I just would like more information on it. It's close to our neighborhood. What's it really going to look like density-wise and so forth? Some of the same concerns as with the other neighborhood. It doesn't look like the access situation will be quite the same, but I just would love more information about what we're building here. Thank you.
Hearing no one else, I'll close the public hearing. Applicant can come up and describe the zoning.
This property's been on the market for, I'm sorry, Roger Ghost, 1120 East Connell. This property's been on the market for about 1,000 days, according to the listing sheet. And Mr. Fritz is willing to sell it, but he wants to keep the house. We can't divide off the house without getting it out of ag zoning. The comprehensive plan calls for CG, Therefore, the application's for CG, no current plan. But to get the house to where it could be sold, that's why this is before you as a zoning application. Then there would be a minor subdivision that would create the 1 acre tract and the remaining 4+ acres to the north.
So the RSS zoning is similar to the previous item in terms of 5,000 square foot per lot. Is that a correct statement? What is the density?
This is a 1 acre tract, and the reason is the way that house sits in there, to draw a boundary line on the north side of the house, 20 feet from the house.
But what we're going to zone to will be what density?
5,000
Okay.
per lot.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Does the applicant want to say anything else?
I guess just to clarify and follow up, the RSS, that lot probably meets the RSL standard, the large lot, single family, but there's nothing contiguous to the south and to the west is RSS. So to avoid the appearance of spot zoning and keeping it consistent. But right now, as Mr. Ghost said, there's no plans that we're aware of. Mr. Fritz wants to sell his house, or wants to sell the north piece, retain the house. We can't legally submit a minor subdivision with the current zoning in place because it would be a non-conforming lot under the ag zoning. So there's RSL across the street to the east, but not on this side of the street and north of Sunrise.
Thank you. Any other questions of the applicant? Staff sorry, the public hearing is closed. Staff, you want to make your recommendation?
Sure. So, as noted, the applicant's looking to do a map amendment to rezone from agriculture to a combination of RSS and GC, which is necessary, as they mentioned, to do future lot splits for sale. You have contiguous RSS zoning for the southern end of this tract. The comprehensive plan calls for a mix of low-density residential and commercial uses in this area, so the map amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan. In terms of alternatives, you could look at deferring the item to a date certain if you feel like there's additional discussion needed or changes in the proposal. You could find that the map amendment is not consistent with the comprehensive plan or is in order and recommend denial, or that you can accept the findings of the staff report and the applicant's request and recommend approval to City Council. Questions for staff at this time?
Just a quick one. If it's rezoned to RSS, theoretically, how many units could be built in this plat?
Well, you have essentially a 1 acre tract. You have in RSS, you have a 5,000 square foot minimum lot size. So you could potentially, depending on access, you could get 2 lots, but you would have to get the other bulk standards met, which would be difficult to do. So in all likelihood, you were taking the house as it sits now, creating a piece, segmenting that off from the remainder of the property as it sits now, and just making it zoning compatible to the adjacent lots to the south and west.
All right, thank you.
Any discussion, or do you want to make a motion? I think this is in accordance with the comprehensive plan. I think I have no problem with this change.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve.
Second the motion.
So the motion to accept findings, recommend the city council approve the proposed map amendment as presented. Let's vote. The motion passes 3-0. Item 3A is the meeting summary of the meeting of January 1st, 2020. Any discussion of that? Do I hear a motion to approve the minute?
I move we approve the minutes.
Mr. McGrath, I have a question for you. Even though I was not present, I can still second the motion to approve. Is that?
Yes, if you're not present, you shouldn't make the motion to approve, but you can make the second. You can vote.
I can vote.
Yes.
Second.
Any discussion? Let's vote. Motion passes 3-0. Item 4A, study session on the Open Meetings Act has been deferred to a later date. Item 4B, next planning commission meeting is February 18th, 2020. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We stand adjourned.